Is this an emergency pod almost?
Technically, yes, because we didn't podcast on it. Oh, I'm glad you were made aware of that. Yeah. So sort of, yeah, it's the Dennis Allen podcast. We didn't really do a good job of three of the coaching hires emergency podcasts. I hope people understand. I know that's sort of that's our bread and butter. We invented the emergency podcast, and now you have everybody trying to copy us, a bunch of frauds and haters out there. It's just how life is. But I will say that, we were just so busy with HQ that wasn't possible. So Brady and I will talk about it. This is our first time chatting about it on Pick Six. The Pick Six Pod. He is the former Saints defensive coordinator over the last 5 years. 5 years, of course. I was the interim DC in 2015. 3 seasons as the Raiders head coach from 2012 to 2014. I think he won like 8-28 or something like that. Did win a Super Bowl with the Saints as a secondary coach in 2009. I kind of like this hire for a lot of reasons, Brady. Continuity, the fact that Dennis Allen probably got a raw deal in Oakland just because that's one of those spots you can't coach. And with so much unknown about what the Saints are going to do, I think it makes just life easier for everyone involved.
Yeah, and that had to have been a lot of the logic behind this. I don't know that Sean Payton stepping down, maybe it was a surprise to the Saints organization, maybe not. It seemed like it was like Gail Benson, that she's the owner, right?
Yeah.
I remember hearing some sound from her after the season and being like, "Oh, we don't know what Sean's going to do."
It's up to him. We don't know. It's like, he's gone.
I was like, really? You don't know? Like, he's better to send you his like goodbye note.
Yeah.
So I think from that standpoint, probably caught at least some people within the Saints organization off guard. And it makes sense that look at what you've built. I mean, you've built in a perennial playoff team, or at least contender. Now that doesn't come with the fact that they are 70-some million over the cap for next year. That's a problem. You've got an aging defense, questions at the quarterback spot. Now your best player overall is probably going to serve time for what Alvin Kamara did in Las Vegas.
He'll be punished at the very least.
Yeah. So now you lose him for whatever period of time or games, et cetera. So there's a lot up in the air right now. That's, I think, the tough part about this. And I guess the one thing that you're doing by hiring Dennis Allen is you're keeping continuity. You're trying to keep that culture intact. And look, I was with DA in Denver in 2011. He was our defense coordinator. So there's some things that I think he does schematically really well that are things to point out. Like, for example, here's a former secondary guy. And I thought one of the things, Ronaldo Hill, who was one of our safeties, and we were talking about, obviously, with Brian Dawkins, some of those guys, is the way he'd go about disguising coverage. And so one of the things is you have to understand how the other athlete is trained or other players trained across from you to then understand how you can manipulate them. Sure. One of the things they do with quarterbacks is, whether you're under center or you catch a shotgun snap, your first thing you're going to do is look up and look through the middle linebacker into the safeties, okay? And you're looking for
I believe that's called reading the safeties.
Sure, if you want to call it that. Really, it's just a post-snap look. But the whole point is this. You're looking for the movement of the mic and then the movement of the safeties, right? If they're rotating one way or another, it's going to some sort of post-high, potentially man, depending on your pre-snap looks. And then watching how the mic moves, right? Whether he drops back, if it stays too high, it's Tampa. If he doesn't. What Dennis always would do a great job of is he would then help those safeties position themselves in a manner where they would give you a pre-snap look. And then post-snap, they would start to move. And so they'd open their hips and take a few steps in one direction and then recorrect.
Oh.
Well, the big key about that was, and it sounds like it's so simple, so stupid, is when you're a quarterback, right, you catch a shotgun snap, it's really your first step where you're going to look downfield to then re-identify where your eyes need to go next. And so once you kind of check out the safeties quick, now your eyes are going to whichever side of the field or wherever they need to be for either the next defender read or the next player you're reading in your progression. So they would trick you because a lot of times, as soon as you look the other direction,
you can't spend 3 seconds watching the safeties. I mean,
exactly. Well, and really, in your drop, if you're under center, your first 3 steps typically are you're going to drop back. First 3 steps, confirming coverage. Now 4, 5, if I have a 5-step drop, are getting my eyes over where they need to be, or to my first read potentially. But in shotgun, it's really only like about a step because your drop is chopped down to 3 steps in shotgun. If it's a 5-step drop normally for timing purposes and all that for the rhythm of the play. So there's just little nuances like that I thought he utilized with that defense in 2011, which was literally helped to lead us to the playoffs that year and winning the AFC West.
I thought it was Tim Tebow that did that led you to the playoffs.
He was a part of that too, obviously. So there's a row of comebacks, but obviously our defense had to play a
Yeah,
part.
the defense is the key.
And by the way, you know who never gets enough credit that year? Willis McGahee. Willis McGahee was unbelievable, and even at his age and at that point in time in his career, and like no one gave as much credit as he deserved. Like people always sit at Tim's locker, and you're like, dude, did you see what this guy just did this game? Like,
that put the team on his back. By the way, just as a quick aside, I mean, I know like we, jabronis like me sit here and criticize quarterbacks and, criticize NFL players. Like when you start describing that, and I don't know if it's because I've been like awake for an obscene amount of time or, just like sort of delirious at this point. But like when you start describing, taking that snap and then you have to do so much crap, so much stuff in such a quick amount of time and make such a mental decision. Like it's insane to think about how quickly you have to identify, like you have to be like, okay, that Mike linebacker is doing this and those safeties are doing that. That means I think this is in Tampa too. So now I have this guy who's going to be cutting across and you have to do it in like 6 seconds. It's freaking crazy when you think about it.
Not 6. I mean, think about the
three,
average.
Whatever. Yeah. I mean,
it's 2.5 seconds.
It's insane. It's insane just to think about how much stuff you have to deal with.
Well, and that's why the best offensive coordinators and offensive minded coaches, they help formulate things to give you some of those answers. And so you, not before the snap, you have your mind made up, but it gives you a pretty darn good idea of where you're going. And so if I know it's zone, I know how I can manipulate them. Or if I know it's man, I already know where my matchup is. And so now it's just a matter of who's the free defender. Is it the middle field safety? Is it potentially a drop down robber or thief, depending on how your terminology? Is it a linebacker? And so now, you start going through that and then figuring out which matchup is best, which, depending on leverage, which guy is more likely to get open based on the route he has. Because that's the other thing. Like people don't understand at the college level, NFL level, if you have an in-breaking route and the defensive back has outside leverage, like that guy's going to win. It's the wide receiver's job to win, especially if he has inside. If he's got.
You're saying if the wide receiver has the inside leverage, he's going to win in that spot.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, if the quarterback's job is to have outside leverage and not get beat outside, he's not going to get beat outside. Very rarely. And if you're a wide receiver and you have an outbreaking route, it's probably dead. So as a quarterback, like when you walk up and you look at it and say, okay, it's a post-high zone coverage and they've got outside leverage out there, you're saying to yourself, it's probably not an outbreaking route that's going to be there. It's probably some more in-breaking route, right? Where I know he's going to be able to win based on leverage. It's the wide receiver's job and it's the quarterback's job.
Right.
So like that sort of thought process as you're looking pre-snap helps you work post-snap a lot quicker and then more confidently, which is a huge key. But then it's like those little nuances of how, as a quarterback, you can manipulate that whole defender or manipulate that cornerback if he starts maybe for the first few steps of his drop back, or I should say backpedal. If he starts looking at you first, then you can give a little nod or something, or separate your hands, something to get him to freeze because he might think the ball's coming out quick. So there's all sorts of little games within the game. Dennis Allen was someone who I thought did a great job of coaching up the secondary on the little nuances of how they would impact the quarterback with where his eyes needed to be and being able to kind of disguise and confuse.
And that's key because, if you're playing, especially if you're playing a young quarterback, you can really turn it into like a possession where you steal something. If you're playing an older quarterback, you need that to help gain some kind of advantage. Otherwise, like,
glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
So let's look at their division. You're most likely going to have either Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask as a young quarterback, or an addition. Maybe you get a veteran guy, maybe not. Maybe you go back to the draft again if you're Tampa Bay. So potential chance you face a young quarterback there. Carolina.
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold, who's been susceptible to turnovers, but also what if they go back in the draft or they go another direction? Again, like another example of at least a younger quarterback or maybe a new quarterback learning the system / potentially draft pick. You go down to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Matt Ryan's still there, probably not getting underneath him, and that kind of stuff doesn't, mess with him as much. But if they move on from Matt Ryan? Then you got to, they have to start thinking about life after Matt Ryan too. So there's the potential for this to really work out in their favor, at least within their division, to keep things afloat, because the strength of this team has been their defense. Like, we can say whatever we want about Drew Brees, and he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'm not saying that. But at the end of his career, the most consistent piece of that team was really their defense when it was all said and done.
They went 7-9 3 straight years until the 2017 draft when they landed, Ryan Ramchick, Kamara, but also a host of defenders, Marshawn Lattimore, PJ Williams, or Marcus Williams, excuse me. And they, all those guys helped to transform that defense, and Dennis Allen's presence there as well. So, yeah. And I think
Michael Thomas missed some time. You've got Brees who missed some time down the stretch. He obviously wasn't the same player, but you had stretches where you had backup quarterbacks going in, and yet this team was still winning despite that. And sometimes like low scoring games in part due to their defense.
Yep. All right. Let's